All right, so obviously, in order to start this build, I need to cut some panels. And I have printed out, I use a software program to do this. I printed out a cut sheet for all my materials. I will, in the description, I'll put a listing of the cut dimensions for your panels. But let's go ahead and do that. We're going to need a number of panels. We're going to need two sides, a front, or I'm sorry, two sides, a back, a top, and a bottom, and then three inserts so that we can hold 28 bottles of wine. All right, now what I'm going to need next, I'm going to need the little basically ½ inch by ½ inch rails that the wine bottles are going to slide into and rest on. They look like these. I'm going to need, so 28 bottles. That means I'm going to need 56 of these. But I do have a box here that I pre-cut. I have a cubby hole under my bench here that's about 24 inches wide, 24 inches deep, that all my scraps go into. So basically anytime I've got a cutoff or anything like that, it gets thrown down into this little cubby hole right here. And by some strange miracle, by the time that thing gets full, I get an order for a wine rack, and I've got to cut them all up, and it's empty again. So I'm going to go ahead and count how many I've got in this box and see if we need to make any more. All right, so it appears as though I have plenty of these in my bucket here. I will say something about this. I'm just going to hold this up here. And for those of you who are woodworkers and do this pretty regularly, you'll notice that these are not all the same. They're the same dimensions. They're ½ inch by ½ inch. But here I've got a stick of pine. Here I've got a stick of poplar. Here I've got a stick of oak, red oak. And realistically, once these rails go in and they get stained, nobody's ever going to notice a difference. I will try and pull out all the same similar species for this, but if not, like I said, once it's in, as long as we're not staining it a light color, you'll never know that there are different types of wood used for these little rails. To make these rails, it's super simple. All I do is I'll take a board. Like I said, I usually use these scraps that I have. I'll set my planer at ½ inch, and I'll just run a bunch of this wood at ½ inch, a whole bunch of strips, and then once it's set at ½ inch, I'll use that width to match that on my table saw, and then I'll rip that ½ inch plain board into ½ inch strips. That way they're perfect. I do use a set of calipers when I do this, because even just a slight difference from 0.5 and 0.51, 0.52 on the other side over the course of a number of these, it does make a difference. So use your calipers. Make sure your saw is really dialed in when you start ripping these to make sure that they are perfectly square. All right, now I've got my inserts. I've got 3 inserts total. These are going to have rails installed on each side of this insert that's going to go in the middle and divide up the space inside. Now, this is time consuming, but it's one of the very few things that I get to do while sitting down in my shop. So I actually appreciate when I have to build these from time to time, because it does give me about, I don't know, about 2 hours that I can just sit and do nothing but put stuff together. Now, what I'm going to do is I've got one of my rails here that I'm going to use as a spacer. I'm going to use a flat piece of wood here at the bottom to flush up with the bottom of the insert itself. And this rail here is just going to act as a spacer so that I can place my next one, which I put a little tiny dab of glue on the back. I'm going to just flush everything up, front, back, up, down. I've got 1 inch pin nails set in my pin nailer, and I'm just going to pin nail that rail in just like that. And I'm just going to repeat this for the next 6 rails. I've got a piece of MDF that is cut exactly to the spacing that I want. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to lay that piece of MDF there, go on to the next one. And glue this one as well. Not a whole lot of glue, just a very little bit of glue. You don't want squeeze out because these are hard areas to get the glue out of once you start staining and realize that you've got glue on there. So it's just a tiny bit of glue down there. Just like that. And I'm going to continue doing this all the way up. I'm going to flip it over, do the other side. I'm going to do that 3 times. And then the sides of the wine cabinet itself also need to have rails installed, but I'm not going to do that until the wine cabinet carcass is put together. I always forget to put, I'm going to put this all together with pocket holes. And I always forget to put my pocket holes at the top. And then ultimately what ends up happening is I put in my rails and I get my 7th rail up here. And then by the time I get up here, I realize I need pocket holes up here. And this thing won't go into my pocket hole machine. And then I've got to do it by hand with those little single pocket hole makers. So I'm going to stop before I go any further. I'm going to go ahead and pocket hole 2 pocket holes in what is going to be the top of this insert. Now that that's out of the way, I can go ahead and continue going up here. This wine rack is going to hold 7 bottles in every column, so I'm going to need 7 rails. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 here, and so I just need 3 more, and I'm just going to continue on putting these rails in. All right, so this divider is done. I got 2 more dividers to do. So I've got my edge bander fired up. I've got the top for the wine rack, and it's the only piece on the wine rack that's going to be edge banded. Everything else is going to be covered with trim. So let's go ahead and edge band this. This is the Maxiwa edge bander, or semi-automatic edge bander. This was about $1,000, $1,200, I don't remember. Real lifesaver when I'm edge banding a lot of materials. This machine takes a little finesse. It takes a bit of setup, but once you get it running, it runs perfectly. Now I'm going to show you what we're going to need before we start edge banding is we're going to need a block. And all I use is just this short little cutoff of pine. And I keep this up here handy because what we're going to do is after I run this through the edge bander and cut it, I'm going to use this block to basically push the edge banding down against the face of the wood. So I'm going to go ahead and run this through. You see it applies the glue and the edge banding in one move. And then I'm just going to use this block and I'm going to press down pretty hard. And I'm going to push that edge banding against the edge of that plywood to get a real good seal. And then I'm going to tilt the block just a little bit. That's an exaggeration, but I'm going to tilt it just a little bit so I make sure that I'm adhering on the corners of the edges. And then I'm not going to do anything to this side until it cools all the way down so that I have a nice adhesion. But I can go ahead and do the opposite side. All right. If you don't do this step, if you don't use a block or something to push the edge of this down, I guarantee you your edge banding is going to peel up, especially when you start to finish this, especially if you are painting it with a paint that shrinks, like emerald urethane or something like that. As soon as you start to finish this, that finish is going to start shrinking. and it's going to start pulling this off, especially if that's water-based. I'm just going to let these two sides cool. I'm going to trim them just like I would trim any other edge banding. Um, you could get a little handheld edge banding trimmer at Lowe's or whatever. I have an electric one that I'll just run it through. And then once this is cooled and the edge band is trimmed, I'll come and do these ends. Here's my edge banding trimmer. This is also made by Maxiwa. You can buy this in a bundle along with the edge bander. It too takes just a little bit to set up, less to set up than the edge bander itself does, but still a little bit to set up and get everything right. But all we're going to do is I'm going to turn on the router here at the back. And there we've got our edge banding trim. Now, trimming edge banding is not difficult. It's super easy, even with a handheld one. The reason I have the machine is because when you're doing 30 or 40 or 50 of these a day, uh, it, it can really start to wear on your wrists to have to cut that by hand repeatedly. So I've got this machine, just makes it a little bit easier. So my top is all edge banded, all four sides here. One thing I want to mention you'll want to do is just take a piece of 220 sandpaper that you have laying around and just barely kiss these edges all the way around. And then especially where these strips of edge banding overlap, so that there's not any little tab, little flake of anything that a child could grab and start picking at, because they will, they're children, and they pick at everything. So we're just going to go through, and that's why we're doing this. We're just kissing those edges of the edge banding to make sure that there's no place where the edge banding can be grabbed and pulled at. And this one's in really good shape. You'll see now that it looks, more or less, it looks like a solid piece of wood, except that it has no end grain. Now, one thing I didn't mention is if you don't have an electric edge bander like I do, an automatic edge bander or semi-automatic edge bander, that's okay. If you have an iron, or get an iron at Walmart for 10 bucks, you can buy this edge banding here from Lowe's. You can get it from Lowe's, you can get it from Amazon. I'll put links in the description. But it's got glue on one side of it. It's felted or fleeced, as I should say. It's fleeced on one side, and then it's got a glue on it that is activated by heat. And all you do is you lay it on the edge. You cut your piece, you lay it on the edge, you take a hot iron, and you basically iron this on to the edge of the plywood, and it's the same thing. I do this a lot of times here when I've only got one piece to do, and I don't feel like waiting for my edge bander to warm up. So this is about $6, $7, I think, last time I checked at Lowe's. You can get it cheaper on Amazon. Again, I'll put links in the description. All right, now these are the side panels that are going to make up the wine rack. And normally I would just go ahead and start assembling everything, but this customer would like the side panels engraved on the side with a design. And I do have a design that I offer standard. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I've got a big laser engraver. I won't show you that. You've probably seen a laser engraver work. I'm going to engrave the sides, and then we'll start assembling the carcass for this wine rack. Now, a drill with any sort of countersink on it will work just fine for this. I make so many of these that I just got my drill press set up. I've got a stop block attached to my drill press here, which just puts this a perfect 3/8 of an inch back from the edge. And that allows me to just get these countersunk holes drilled really quick. I'm going to do what's going to be the left side of the cabinet. And I'll do what's going to be the right side. Okay, so I've got my sides here. I've got my bottom, and I've got what's going to be my back. The entire, the sides and the back of the wine rack are going to sit on top of the bottom. That is, I'm not going to butt joint and screw in from the side. I'm going to screw this bottom on from the bottom just to give me a little more strength. So this thing's going to go together like so. And that's going to sit on that bottom panel. Now, you can spend a lot of time worried about whether everything is square. You may find yourself a lot of times checking to see if things are square, finding that things aren't square. If you're going through this, if you're having that kind of problem where you're finding your panels aren't square, you know, all I can say is your best friend is to go ahead and spend the hour or hour and a half to really dial in your saws, your miter saw, your table saw, everything. Really dial them in. Make sure you're at a perfect 90. Make sure that your fence is square. Everything. If you could do that, then most of the time you're not going to have to check, and everything's going to go together just beautifully. So in order to put this together, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my right side here, or left side actually, and I'm going to temporarily perfect every corner. And if we do it this way, by the time we're done, everything is going to be just perfect. So I'm going to come up to this top corner here, make sure that everything's sitting right, make sure I'm nice and flush. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take a brad nailer. I'm going to put a brad nail there. I'm going to come to the bottom and do the same thing. I set a brad nail here at the bottom. All right. Now I'm going to check this seam along the back and side. And what I'm looking for is there's always going to be either a bow in or a bow out. This one bows towards me. So I'm just going to kind of push this in till it's flush and land a couple of brad nails there. I'm going to come over to the other side and do the same thing. Again, working from the top. I'm going to make sure this corner is perfect. Land a brad nail there. Go to the bottom. Land one at the bottom. And then check this back if I need to come in or out. I'm just going to land 2 brad nails right there to put this box together. And we have the basic shape of the wine rack coming together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set some screws in here. So what I'm using is a Type 17 number 8 wood screw. It does have a tapping tip on it, and it's a square drive. It's actually a combination drive, square and Phillips. If you haven't upgraded to square drive screws yet, you're really missing out. Just going to screw this carcass together here. Now, because my screws have a self-tapping tip on them and the sides have been just perfectly countersunk the right distance from the edge, I don't really have to worry about the plywood in the back expanding at all, because the screw will drill it out as it goes, and I'm perfectly right in the center of that sheet of plywood. And there you have it. There is at least the back and sides of our wine rack done. I'm not going to put the bottom on yet, because what I need to do now is I need to put the rails in the rails for the wine bottles in the sides of both of these sides of the wine rack. All right, so I've switched back to my 23 gauge pin nailer. And once again, I'm going to use one of the rails as a spacer at the bottom. And then my next rail that's actually going to get nailed in, go ahead and run a very light layer of glue down the edge of that. I'm going to flush it up with the front. If there's a little space in the back, it doesn't matter. Nobody's ever going to see that. This one has about a 32nd of an inch at the back that doesn't go all the way back, but no big deal. All right, there's that. Now that we have that one in, we can go ahead and put the rest in with my spacer. All right, all my side rails are in, and so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to attach the bottom. When I cut these bottoms, I cut them about a 1/16 of an inch long from left to right. And I do that so that I can have just a little wiggle room on the other side to get everything perfectly square and then flush trim the entire box so that it's nice and even. So I say that because I'm not going to do what I did last time, which is pre-drill the holes in the bottom of here. At least I'm not going to pre-drill them on one side. I'm going to pre-drill or pre-countersink right here, and then I'll do these by hand. All right, I'm back to my brad nailer with my 1 1/4 inch brads in it. And again, I'm going to start the same way. I'm going to come in this back corner, and I'm going to perfect this back corner. Make sure everything's nice and flush and even. And I'm going to land a brad nail there. Now, I know my bottom panel is square because my saw is dialed in perfectly. So I can move this side up and down to match and be flush with my bottom panel. I'll land a brad nail there and one in the middle just for good measure. Now I'm going to rotate this over and do the same thing on this side. I'm going to come to the back. I'm going to make sure everything's nice and flush. Land a brad nail there. And then I'm going to come here and I'm going to visually inspect the distance, basically the reveal or the excess I have here, and just keep that same distance all the way down. I'm just gonna eyeball it. Gotten pretty good at this over the years. Right there's good. Land a couple brad nails. And now this tiny bit of overlap I have here, I'm just going to trim off with my flush trim bit. Now, if you're not accustomed to using a flush trim bit, you are going to want to make sure that when you set the depth of this flush trim bit, that really you're going only as far as you need to get the bearing to ride on the secondary piece of wood here. Let me show you what that looks like. Say that this is our edge here, and we've got a panel running up and down this side, and this edge is just a little proud, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to set the height of my flush trim bit just there, so that this bearing, this is a little wider than a piece of plywood, but this bearing runs along this panel here and not against the edge, and that way we can get it truly flush. And now I've got this edge perfectly flush with the side of this wine rack. And there you have it. There's the carcass. And then we're going to put these these inserts, these dividers in. One thing I did off camera that you didn't get to see is that I put 2 pocket hole screws in the inside edge of each one of these dividers so that we can install them, and they're going to go in just like this. Once they're in and aligned, I'm going to screw them in from the bottom. I'm going to screw them in to the back with the pocket hole screws. And then the 2 pocket hole screws that I put on top, once the top is on, I'm going to screw them to the top as well. So that when this thing is all built, it's going to be built like a tank. All right, now to put this first divider in, I'm going to take my spacer, the same spacer that I used to space the rails here. I'm going to use that to space these dividers throughout the span here. Just going to use a couple pocket hole screws. There's one. And there's 3. Now, on the bottom, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, use my spacer. I'm going to space these out because they will not be straight. And just land some brad nails in here. I'm going to take my combination square and just very quickly mark myself a line right down the center of these. And I'm just going to now I'll just secure these in. And don't forget that we've got to put our screws around the perimeter of this base. And there you have it. The carcass, the base cabinet for this wine rack is done. Now, all we're going to do is make the trim that goes on it. These are the wine racks that I sell on Etsy. Etsy and my own personal website, Amazon. I sell on Wayfair as well. And I was just approved to sell on Walmart.com. The ones I sell online through my stores, they are made of pine. It's a pine and birch mix. So it's a birch-based ply with pine trim, okay? But I make these all the time for customers in different wood types. I can make them out of oak, like white oak, red oak, alder, walnut, maple, you name it. Almost every kind of wood out there you can make these out of. You just have to make sure that you can source the plywood. Here is an oak-faced, red oak-faced plywood. And then here's alder. This is rustic alder, a very beautiful wood. It doesn't look like much right now, but when you just clear coat it, and honestly, that's the best thing to do with alder is just to clear coat it. It's beautiful. It's got this beautiful color to it. It's not a deep brown. It's almost kind of a reddish, just slight reddish color. Very pretty. But you can make them out of whatever you want. We're going to do this out of pine. So in order to do that, I've got to cut some pine up. And all I'm going to do is, I know that I want this trim. This trim is going to double as not just trim, but as feet or legs on this. But they're only going to be an inch high. Now I'm going to need 6 stiles total. The side stiles I'm cutting to 2¼ inches. The front stiles, the stiles of course are the pieces of trim that go up and down. The front stiles are going to be 1.5 inches or just shy, maybe a 1/16 shy of 1.5 inches to go on the front. And then I'm going to need 2¼ inch rails for both sides and the front. The front is 2¼ inch on the rails. So because I know that I want this trim to double as feet, basically, and I need an extra inch, I'll just go ahead and measure. Use the tape measure, use the side of the tape measure that you can see. I'm at 30¼ so I need to cut my trim at 31¼ to make these. I've got these cross cut. Let's go rip them on my other table saw. So I've got my trim cut basically 1 inch longer than the height of this cabinet. I'm going to go ahead, these don't get cut at all except for straight edges. I'm just going to apply a liberal amount of glue all the way down this stile that's going to go in the back. If you don't have one of these for your glue, one of these little condiment dispensers, I'll tell you, it's the way to go. You can't beat it. I'm going to spread the glue out a little bit. I'm not going to go crazy with it, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I get good contact with this glue. I'm going to set this stile up against my wine rack here, but I'm proud. I'm overhung a little bit off the back side, and I'm just going to kind of run this back and forth, up and down, while applying pressure, just so that I can get a nice coat of glue there. I'm going to use a block here in the back just to make sure that I am straight and flush in the back. Put a pin nail there. One there. Now you can use brad nails instead of pin nails if you like. If you think that's going to make it stronger. Really, it's the glue that's going to make this a strong bond. You're just going to have to fill holes, whereas with the pin nailer, you don't. We're gonna sand, or I'm going to sand this pretty aggressively, and by the time it's all said and done, you're not going to even see those pin nail holes because they're so small to begin with. And then we're basically just going to sand flush, and the pin nails themselves will sand as well. And so you're not even going to see them. Got a little bow here in this trim. So I'm going to go ahead and even it out. Now that I've got the sides trimmed, I can go ahead and trim the front, just like so. Cut a little more trim, which is going to be the 3/4 inch pieces of trim that are going to cover the plywood on the front of these dividers, but those are going to go in last. I also cut some more 2¼ inch trim to make the rails out of. So I'm going to make the first rail. Now to save, I need a big piece here for the front rail and a big piece for the back rail. Um, let's see if one will cut it here, and it will. So I'm just going to start making this trim. Here I'm going to just lay that in there, mark it from the back. That's going to be my top left. Come over here, mark this one. All right, now what I've got here is I've got a template that I cut on my laser to cut the bottom profile of the rail that goes against the floor. And I'm just going to lay that template there and mark it just like so. And then we'll go over to the bandsaw. You can cut that with a jigsaw. You can cut it on a router, whatever. A lot of ways, a lot of scroll saw. It's up to you. I just used a bandsaw because it's always plugged in and it's quick. So I'm going to go ahead and the bottom piece is going to go in just like so. Make sure to put a liberal amount of glue on there. We're only going to nail at the top of that, right? Because we do have that 1-inch overhang. Same thing here, liberal amount of glue. I usually like to leave it leave it a little proud. Just smash it in there to make sure you get that glue all nice and even. And then I'll turn the piece because most of the glue will end up at the bottom. I'll turn the piece this way to minimize any risk of squeeze out here. Just like so. And this side of the wine rack is done. Now I'm just going to come over here and do the same thing. We will mark our top. I will say that if you're making your top and bottom rails here, and one of these pieces of wood has a big knot in it, save it for the top. You don't want to try and cut a contour in a piece of wood that's got a knot because you just risk weakening that piece of wood and having that knot fall off later. And the other side is done. Now all we have to do is make the rails for the top and bottom on the front. Same thing. I've got a big knot here. Going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut this top rail square, and then I'm going to cut the bottom rail. I've got a template for it too to put an arch in the bottom rail. Top rail is going to be installed up here just like so. But if you notice, if I pull this off, I don't really have a whole lot to attach to here. Now, I could have put pocket holes up here in the side of this, but what I do is, and I do this to also keep the spacing consistent, is I used my template, my spacing template, to cut these little square blocks. And in the top of the block, I've got 2 pocket holes, one running in each direction. And then on the other side, I have 1 pocket hole running perpendicular to the direction of the first 2. And so these 2 I'm going to use to attach to the sides. And then this one I'm going to use to attach to the front rail. So you always want to make sure that this pocket hole is facing out like that. I'm going to put just a tad bit of glue here. This will give me something. This will give me something a lot meatier to attach my front rail to. now I'm going to put the the front rail in on the bottom, but I have the same problem. I don't have a whole lot of meat to attach to here, so I need to be able to reinforce this connection. So to do that, the way I do that is I come underneath like this, and I'm just going to mark basically the middle right between these dividers, and I use one of these single pocket hole cutters. Going to put a little glue along this plywood here. Not too much because I am going to use those pocket holes, and those pocket holes are going to be strong. All that's left to do now is to take the 3/4 inch strips that I cut before and cut them for the front of the wine rack. Now we've got the top already done. We did that in the earlier step. Just going to lay that top right on there. And this wine rack is ready to basically finish sand, fill, sand again, and then stain or paint. If you wanted to paint it, you could. All right, now one thing I want to mention is that I didn't realize it until we got all the way to the end of the video, because I was paying so much attention to making the video, explaining everything that I was doing, that I missed a huge step. And that step is to stain or paint the inside of the wine rack before you put it together. It's not that you can't do it. I do it from time to time, especially when I forget, like I did today. Usually don't forget, but my mind was elsewhere today. So hopefully you haven't been building along with me this whole time and now realizing that you made the same mistake. Hopefully you're watching this video before you're going to make it. Hopefully. But yeah, stain the inside first. That's all I got. This should take you about, I don't know, 2 days, 3 days, if you don't have a whole lot of time to devote to it. This thing needs to dry all night so that all the trim dries on, all the joints dry before we start hitting it aggressively with a sander. Let's see, cost. The cost isn't that much. Basically, the wood for if you were to get this at say at Lowe's, the plywood would cost you probably, you'd have to buy a whole sheet, so probably 80, 90 bucks there. The trim, which would be a select pine, or you can do yellow pine or whatever, that at Lowe's is also probably going to run you about $40. So you're looking at, in materials, maybe 120, 140, somewhere in that neighborhood, and then 2 or 3 days worth of time. And then whatever materials, screws, whatnot, glue, you name it. Anyways, if you like this wine rack and you don't want to go through all the trouble of making it yourself, I make them and I sell them on my Etsy at the Web Ranch